Welcome to Mineclass, where we strip back some of the basics of Minecraft. Mineclass isn't just for new players. Even experienced Minecrafters can rediscover things that they had forgotten, or even principles that they just never really thought about. G'day, this is Ghost Wolf, and today's lesson is on dyes. At the time of recording this, Minecraft is in a transitional period between the dyes used in 1.8 and what will be used starting from Content Update 1.9. So for this video, I'll be using the upcoming 1.9 recipes and dyes. First of all, we'll talk about what dyes are useful for, and I did touch on this in my Mineclass on flowers, but dyes are used to craft items or change the colour of things. Tamed wolves can have their collar dyed to any of the 16 dye colours. Sheep can be dyed to produce coloured wool. Wool, beds, leather armour and shulker boxes can be dyed. Glass and terracotta can be stained, which can then be further crafted into stained glass, panes and glazed terracotta. Concrete and fireworks stars require dye when crafted, and fireworks stars can then be dyed to add a fade to colour effect. Dyes are used to colour and add patterns to banners. And finally, dyes can be mixed in cauldrons, changing the colour of the water within. Here I've set up the 16 colours in 3 materials: concrete, stained terracotta and wool. Concrete has bright, vibrant colours with a smooth and seamless texture. The exception to this is white concrete, which does have a distinct grey appearance, and that's quite noticeable against the iron blocks. Stained terracotta produces earthy, muted colours, with the reddish tones of the terracotta coming through and a subtle texture. And this undertone is most noticeable in white stained terracotta, which is a soft, rosy pink. Wool produces what might be considered the most true colours, but it does have a very pronounced texture pattern. While most uses of dyes are purely aesthetic, one colour of concrete or glass, for example, doesn't have any different properties from any other colour of concrete or glass. Colour coding can be useful in the case of shulker boxes, and coloured banners can be used to create markers on maps. And all you need to do is place down a banner, and then with the map in your hand, use the map on the banner, and that banner icon will appear on your map. Next, I wanted to go over the dye recipes fairly quickly for the sake of completeness. Some basic colour theory applies: red and yellow make orange, red and white make pink, but there are some exceptions. Starting with black dye. Black dye can be produced from ink sacs, which are gained from squid, and you will be able to craft black dye from wither roses in 1.9. Blue dye can be crafted from lapis lazuli. In 1.9, you will also be able to craft blue dye from cornflowers. Light blue dye can be crafted from the combination of blue and white dye. Light blue can also be crafted from blue orchids that grow in swamps. Cyan dye is the combination of blue and green dyes. Green dye is unusual in that it is not made on a crafting table, and it can be a little difficult to figure out for first time players. But to make green dye, you need to get cactus and smelt it in a furnace. But what about adding blue and yellow dye together? Surely that makes green? Unfortunately, no. The only way to produce green dye is by smelting cactus. Lime dye, which is essentially light green, is made by combining green dye and white dye, but it can also be obtained by smelting sea pickles. Pink dye can be made from red and white dye, but it can also be made from pink tulips and peonies. Magenta, which is midway between pink and purple, can be produced from allium, from lilacs, by combining pink and purple dye, or if you want to skip the purple step, you can combine blue, red and pink dyes together. If you don't have pink dye, you can also craft magenta dye from blue, red and 2 white dyes. Purple dye is crafted using blue and red dyes. Red dye can be crafted from beetroot, poppies, red tulips, or rose bushes. Brown dye is made from cocoa beans, which can be found growing on the sides of jungle trees. Orange dye can be produced by combining red and yellow dye, or from orange tulips. Yellow dye, previously known as dandelion yellow, can be made from dandelions or from sunflowers. Grey dye is produced by combining black and white dyes. Light grey dye can then be produced by adding an additional white dye to the grey, or by adding 2 whites to the initial black dye, from oxeye daisies, azure bluets, or white tulips. Finally, white dye comes from bone meal, and in 1.9 from lilies of the valley, which will grow in flower forests. Dyeing wool is the least efficient of any of the block items, requiring a unit of dye for every block of wool. And for this reason, it's far more useful to dye the sheep and shear it for its wool, because the wool will be coloured. Additionally, you don't need all 16 dyes to produce all 16 coloured sheep, as certain colours can be produced by breeding sheep. So on the left side of the screen, I've got a list of the 16 colours, and I'll tick them off as we go. To start with, you need a white sheep, a black sheep, a brown sheep, the 3 primary colours, yellow, red and blue, and you'll need a green sheep. Now, like the dye recipes, you unfortunately cannot combine a yellow sheep and a blue sheep to get a green sheep. So you will need to get yourself some of that cactus green in order to get the green sheep. But these 7 sheep are the only ones that you need to dye. The rest you can breed. Breeding a white sheep to a black sheep will produce a grey sheep. Breeding that grey sheep to a white sheep will then give you light grey. Yellow and red make orange. Red and blue make purple. Blue and green make cyan. Red and white make pink. Blue and white for light blue. And green and white for lime. And finally, pink and purple to make magenta. In this video, I won't be going over the glazed terracotta patterns or dyeing banners, as both of those are a little beyond the scope of this video, but I will cover dyeing leather armour with a cauldron, because that works a little bit differently to using a crafting table. So here I have set up 16 armour stands, which is the maximum you can have in any given world on the PlayStation. Fortunately, that is exactly enough for each colour, though not enough to have an undyed set for comparison. So generally when you dye an item, its current colour is replaced completely. However, dyes can be mixed in cauldrons to produce colours beyond the 16 base colours. So to demonstrate, I have 16 cauldrons that have been dyed the 16 dye colours, and I'm going to add black to each of them. And this will produce a darker colour that the leather armour can be dipped in. And I'm going to dip the chest piece from each of these armour sets in their respective cauldrons. so you can see the colour that the mixing has produced. So I've flushed and re-dyed the cauldron, and this time I'm going to add white to each of them to make a lighter colour. Any colour can be used in this fashion, such as light blue, or green. This chart from the Minecraft wiki shows all of the possible colour combinations using 2 dyes. However, I do know that you can put red dye in a cauldron and then add black to it multiple times to make an increasingly dark tone. So go ahead and experiment with your cauldrons. Throw a bunch of dyes in there, go wild. And that concludes today's Mineclass. Thank you for your attendance. Gonna have fun cutting that out.